Business with a servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the podcast. We're all about to talk about life. Our guests will share their life story. We want you to success in life and business. We're ready and we will start shortly. We're gonna talk about life. We're going to speak on business. You're gonna shine bright. We are going to witness. Business with a servant's heart. With hosts Steve, Ramon, and Ray. Inspiration, education talks. Listen to the podcast.
BrainShare Business Mentors proudly presents BrainShare.us, the ultimate business education platform, delivering the proven systems, processes, tools, and knowledge that empower you to build the business of your dreams. With 13 high-powered courses encompassing over 240 lessons accessed online on your schedule. Running a business is the hardest thing you'll ever do. We've helped thousands of business owners gain the leadership, communication, and business skills needed to build the business of their dreams. We can help you. Choose your learning path. Scuba Squad is the premier membership program for today's business leaders with access to all BrainShare material and double our money-back guarantee. BrainShare Basics, the ultimate business framework course, a hard-hitting 13-week program to lay the necessary foundation to build the business of your dreams. Or take individual courses as you need them. Every course has dozens of lessons, with video, practical exercises, precise documentation, and the opportunity for direct feedback from a BrainShare mentor. All programs have our exclusive 30-day money-back guarantee. No questions asked, don't wait. Choose your path and start today.
Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. Doing business and life with a purpose. Serving others, yes, achieving success. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. We created this show for you because we want everyone to be motivated, inspired, and educated to make an impact in your world. As you listen to this unbelievable guest today, I want you to think about how you're going to serve today and what impact you're going to create with that service today. I want to thank my two sponsors, BrainShare.us. Drive business success and sustainability with BrainShare Business Mentors, where your business flourishes and your vision comes to life. Check out the link in the show notes. Also, PitchDB. Imagine being a guest on over 3 million podcasts or the ability to speak at over 11,000 conferences and many, many more opportunities. Build your thought leader platform with incredible opportunity to show who you are. With that being said, as I always say, we want to make an impact, you as the audience. But this guest, oh my God, all the way from Australia, love her accent, by the way, on a side note. She's been through a lot. I didn't know that till before the show. I learned a little bit more things that she's learned. She's a rock star coach. She really helps people a lot and supports them. Jas, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Steve. It's great to be here.
And I'm jazzed to be here. But I had to do that. If I hear that a million, yeah, thank you. I don't play the drums well. I want to jump into this. Trauma has been a big part of your life. How did you take trauma and transform that pain into purpose? And you become an award-winning advocate speaker, and even you swam with sharks in a reality TV show. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, I'll answer the first part in a little bit. But yes, I did swim with sharks. It wasn't something I ever saw myself doing. But a couple of years ago, I had this really great opportunity to go on this reality TV show with a philanthropy twist. So it's a show called Adventure All Stars, and it's viewed all around the world. But it was also played on our major networks here in Australia. And as part of that, they get a group of people who are fundraising money for a particular charity and cause, and they take them away to a secret location where they don't have any idea what they're going to do over the course of that week. And for me, look, I wish I did go somewhere a little bit more exciting, because due to lockdowns, we had to stay in our state. But we were in a place called the Sunshine Coast. And on one of those days, the bus took us to a location. We didn't know where we were going. And they handed me a form and just said, have a look at this. Would you like to do it? And it said swimming with sharks. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it to, raise funds and awareness for ending child exploitation. So it wasn't in the ocean. I will say it wasn't as scary as it could have been. It was in a place called Sea Life. So we were in like a huge tank, and we had, all the diving gear and stuff. But there were sharks, swimming around us. And there was a fish, for anyone that's watching the video right now, there was a fish that was probably about, I don't know, this big. It was pretty big. And it swam past me with a big chunk out of its back.
Oh my God.
And I was like, please don't let that be me. But they did say they fed the sharks before we went in, and everything was fine. And it was actually ended up being a very beautiful and quite serene experience, actually, being down there with the fish and the sharks and massive rays, manta rays, or massive other types of rays swimming over our heads. So that was a very cool experience that I got to do a couple of years ago, and leads into obviously a lot of the advocacy work that I do. But to come back to the first question you asked about, how did I get into doing all of this kind of stuff and being an advocate and a voice for the voiceless when I experienced, so much trauma in my youth, with family violence, sexual assault, things like that. I think it's really important to share with people that I certainly didn't go from that trauma to speaking about it overnight. It was about a 10-year process just to acknowledge that I had PTS, that I had post-traumatic stress, and to deal with that. And it wasn't until I dealt with that I really did start to speak up and become an advocate. And I think the other really important thing that I wanted to mention too is that I believe the only reason I've been able to do this advocacy work is because I have been able to cultivate a safe life that I now live. If I didn't have a safe home to live in, if I didn't have a healthy marriage, a healthy partner, if I didn't have a somewhat more regulated nervous system than I used to have, if I hadn't done a lot of the personal development work that I've done, I don't believe I would be able to do this. Because if you're just living in flight mode or fight mode or freeze mode all the time, it's very hard to, and this goes for anybody in the entrepreneurial world, it's very hard to actualize your goals and see them come to life, because you really do need to have a regulated nervous system to do that well. And you also need to have safety around you if you're going to be speaking up about very traumatic or possibly triggering things. And, I've had an example of that happen just this week, which, maybe is another story, but, could have been a lot more triggering if I hadn't done the work that I've done. And so I'm able to be a voice and a support person for a lot of people out there because I've done that work.
God bless you for being an advocate. This is big. Domestic violence is bigger than people think. I've had other guests on, so I'm glad that you're transparent, open with us about this, because it can't be hard. But what comes to mind to me? What is a really good tip you can leave with the audience that's had domestic violence? Because males have domestic violence too. It's not a lot, but it happens both ways. It's just not female. Most of it is. But what would you give? What's a great tip for them?
In terms of leaving,
getting past getting past this domestic violence to be where you're at today. What helped you get there?
Yeah. So one thing I talk about a lot, which I feel is so important, and a lot of people miss this, is if you are working on your healing journey and you just feel like it's going very slow, or maybe you've been seeing a therapist for years or even a decade, and you just feel like you're kind of stagnate, like you never really get that much better, I would always recommend, if you're open to trying something, to try doing some EFT, so emotional freedom technique, often known as tapping. There's a million videos on YouTube like a wonderful free resources all over YouTube. But for me personally, like, even though I have come so far, there have been times where, you know, I've met with my EFT therapist who's based in Canada. She's a great trauma expert in EFT therapy, and stuff has come up that I've been holding in my body that I just haven't been aware of. So, for example, when I was writing my last book, it's called The Stories We Carry, which is my memoir and my personal story. I remember I was really going through a lot of emotional burnout because there was so much emotion that obviously I had to go through to write the book. And there was trauma that came back up. And even though I did my best to care for myself during the writing process, I guess I didn't realize what I was carrying in my body. And there's that great quote in that great book that most people are aware of, the body keeps the score. And it really is true. Like, our bodies hold on to all the emotion, all the trauma, everything we've experienced. And if we don't have the tools to get it out of our body, it just stays there. So for me, it often sits in my gut. And like, even right now, I can feel my gut is quite tight. There's been a lot going on for me the past few weeks. And so when I met with my EFT therapist after I'd finished the book, I said, you know, I feel very flat. I don't really have any motivation. I just feel a bit low energy and a bit sad, but I think I'm okay. You know, like, I've been processing everything. And then as we were going through the EFT practice, I ended up having a panic attack during that. And that sounds in some ways like counterintuitive, but it's because it was there all along and I was just suppressing it. I was feeling the low energy. I was feeling a bit anxious. I was feeling burned out, but I wasn't recognizing that there was so much emotion that I was holding on to that I just kind of pushed aside and was getting on with life. And through the process of doing the tapping, which, if you're not familiar with tapping, just go on YouTube and, you know, type in tapping for anxiety or anything you can think of. And as we did it, it came up and, you know, I was stuttering, I was crying, but within 5 to 10 minutes, it had moved out. I could speak clearly again. There was energy back in my body. And it took probably 2 days to really sort of, you know, come through that. But then I was much better than I had been. So I talk about EFT a lot. It's very powerful. You can use it for anything and everything, even, you know, food intolerances. I've used it to start eating foods again that I used to have terrible reactions to, which again, I think was emotionally based. So anything and everything, I recommend, you know, go to YouTube, look at somebody like Brad Yates. He's like a veteran in this space. He's been on YouTube since it started, so like over 12 years, I think. Sherry Lukey is another good one. And you'll just find so many free resources that I really recommend that for any trauma survivor out there.
Thank you for sharing, because I'm also thinking you just helped out people that stress before a meeting. You know, I've got my meeting with my boss about a raise, for example. I'm going to go look at myself, because we all deal with that. Yours was much deeper.
I even do it.
Right.
Yeah, I even do it before like big meetings. Like sometimes if
Yeah.
I have a meeting with someone that, like a sales call, you know, and I'll just do some tapping around, like, it's safe for me to share my expertise and it's safe for me to, you know, to be paid well for the work I do and to have a new client. And I'll do tapping around that just to get rid of any like worthiness issues, any self-worth issues. You can do it for everything. So
yeah, thank you. And I'm going to look into it too, because we all deal with it. It's just different levels. But if there's a tool that's super, you know, maybe it's tapping, like you said, tapping your forehead, or, you know, I think somebody was showing me this.
The whole process, you tap from the head through all of the points where there's a whole heap of concentration of large concentrations of nerve endings. But it's easier for people to look it up and see how it works. I'll also send you a link after today to a playlist that I put together on YouTube for my clients of really great tapping videos, or even like meditation videos that they can do.
You're a true servant's heart. That's why I'm so glad we first met. I felt this, and I appreciate you doing the free things, because that's what I talk about. Give out, help people, bring value. But I'm super excited. You took this incredible, terrible, tragic situation with domestic violence, and you built it into this wonderful business where you're helping people. Let's talk about how you did that.
Yeah, so it all kind of started quite naturally. I'd say when I went on maternity leave with my son, which was about 7 years ago, I had this idea to write a book, and I ended up writing my first book when I was pregnant. It's part of a series called Reasons to Live. Actually have one of them on my desk here, the rest are behind me. But the very first book I wrote, it was a tiny book. If you're watching the video, you'll see super tiny. People could read it in a couple of hours, and people loved it because every chapter was a different person's story of overcoming adversity and how they got through really, really tough things. And that was really just a passion project for me to create the first book in the Reasons to Live series. But from there, I guess a lot of people came to me and they said, oh, well, I wish I could share my story. Like, if you'd ever do another book, I would love to write my story. And because I do have a background in psychology and creative writing, and I used to work for other businesses as a magazine editor, ghostwriter, editor, all kinds of things, I just sort of naturally moved into that. And I did a book for free where the first book, I just worked with everyone for free. And then after that, when I realized there was a demand for people who didn't necessarily want to write a full book yet, but it was very important for their healing to write their story and be able to put it out there, I started to do some story coaching and some book coaching. And then gradually that grew into a 6-year book coaching business, which I've only just recently closed, decided it's time to sort of do something new. But for 6 years, I've been working with people to write their books or write their stories, and working with a lot of everyone from entrepreneurs to everyday change makers, parents, athletes, people that really just want to use their story to create change for somebody else. And it might be leaving a legacy for their family and their children, or it might be to impact people in their community, or it might be to reach people globally. But really just working with people very much like yourself who have that servant's heart, very mission driven, and they want to use their adversity to really advocate on something important. So that's sort of what I've predominantly been doing for the past 6 years. And then alongside that, I've also been growing my speaking business, because as I was doing the book coaching, people were really, it was interesting. People were really attracted to working with me because I wasn't just doing book coaching like a lot of book coaches will do, but because I'm also an advocate, I was teaching people about the advocacy side of things and how to pitch their story to the media and how to get journalists to open their emails and what does a good email pitch look like and all these sorts of things. So at the same time, I've been growing my speaking business, and now what I'm really focusing on is working either with corporates or with schools to teach, either school students or corporates and their employees, what are the red flags of unhealthy relationships? What is the difference between, green flags in a relationship, healthy relationships, and red flags, and which are toxic relationships? And how do you learn to set boundaries in your life? What do boundaries look like? What are some examples of what you can say to set boundaries in different ways, whether it is teenagers who are trying to set boundaries in a relationship or with their friends, trying to say no to experiences that they don't want to be part of, or whether it's adults in a company who, maybe are living 2 different lives where they come to work and they perform very well and they look like the person that's got everything together, but at home, maybe they're in an abusive relationship and they're struggling to know what help is available and how to put boundaries up if that's a safe thing to do, or even how to put boundaries up in the workplace with toxic, toxic co-workers. I'm sure a lot of us have experienced that, working with a boss or a coworker who is,
Yeah.
a very toxic person, and you need to start putting up boundaries. So at the moment, I'm just finding that understanding particularly emotional abuse is really difficult for a lot of people, right through from the teenage years to like people in their 60s. And so I've been looking at who needs me the most and how can I help them best. And right now I'm discovering that these two environments, corporate environments, where, there are people who really want to lead the way as managers, as workplaces, they want to know how they can support employees who might be experiencing domestic violence. And then also stopping it before it gets to there by going into high schools and, empowering teenagers to know what the red flags are of emotional abuse and how they can set boundaries so that they don't become those 40, 50, 60-year-olds that I have been working with over the past 6 years. So, it's been an interesting journey, but I'm just really focusing now on trying to turn lives around before they become the damaged adults that I generally meet down the track.
Are you getting a lot of healing from doing your business? It sounds like it to me, but I don't want to.
I do, but it does also take a lot of energy. And I think sometimes people don't recognize that. They think, oh, if you are passionate about something, you never work a day in your life, you'll love it. But it does take a lot of work. And I guess that comes into my journey with boundaries, has been learning what's my, capacity to do this work. And so I work with this, now when I work with clients who want to come to me for, say, advocacy and media coaching, one of the questions I'll ask is, well, what's your emotional and your time-based capacity for what you want to do? Because you can't help everyone, right? So what's most important to you? And for example, one client I was talking with the other week, she wanted to create this Facebook group to help, people who've experienced generational trauma. And I said, that's great. But before you start inviting people in and making this big community, what is your time capacity for this? So for example, how much time during each week can you dedicate to serving these people without burning yourself out? Like, you need to know that first, because maybe it's that you just do a live video every Friday, right? And maybe you answer questions on a Wednesday. Or maybe you have the energetic capacity to do videos every day or be in the group every day. But even if you do, you still need to set boundaries around that so that you don't end up building this group where people are messaging you at 10 o'clock at night being like, oh, just to use my name, Jas will help me with this. Jas is a kind person. She'll be there for me. She'll listen to me. She'll fix this right now. She'll fix every problem when it comes up, whenever I want an answer. So I was like, you need to know what's your energetic capacity, what are your boundaries, and then focus on building the group. So
boundaries are huge. That's so huge, because I know a lot of people that start podcasts and Facebook groups and businesses without thinking about that. I mean, that's so well said, because you got to do that. If you want to start a business, especially as an entrepreneur, you can do it 20 hours a week, but know what your expectation is when you do that, how much money you're going to make, what that looks like, and just being prepared. What I love about you too is you're an advocate for human trafficking. Probably falls on domestic violence a little bit, but it's outside that sphere a little to me. Why did you jump into that, be an advocate there as well?
I think I really started to learn about human trafficking in a period of my time where I was feeling very lost. I was about 25, and this is before I had any kind of career. I was trying to get a job in my industry out of uni, and I wasn't, like many people, I couldn't find a job anywhere. I was working in a bulk health food store at the time. So, like scooping bulk, like dried figs or,
protein powder or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
protein powder. I was working in that kind of shop and actually got fired from there because I asked if I could have a long weekend off to go and this is key to the story. I really wanted to go and volunteer at this music and arts and cultural festival that was a couple of hours away, because I felt if I could go and do that for a weekend and volunteer as a photojournalist, it would be a stepping stone to me getting some real experience to go with my university degree that might get me a job. Now, I actually got fired from my boss because she wasn't happy that I asked for that time off, but it ended up being the best thing I could have done because at that festival, I started to meet all of these amazing advocates and charity owners and people doing really amazing work in the world. And it was at that festival that I covered a story that was on human trafficking. And I remember being in this tent, watching this little documentary, standing in the dark, watching this footage of like horrific things that, I don't need to go into, but horrific things that happen to children and women and boys and men as well worldwide. And I just couldn't walk away from there and do nothing. I didn't have a job at that time, as I said, but when I walked out, I made a commitment that I was going to start sponsoring one of their survivors. I was like, whatever, I will use my Centrelink, like government money, this tiny little bit of money, $200 a week or something, or less, $160 a week or something. I'll use $50 of that, about that, every month to sponsor this child. And I will do it with a belief that I will be able to financially afford to do this. So it was a bit of a leap of faith, but I was just so moved. I was like, I cannot do nothing in this situation. And that led me to then go and, do some volunteer work overseas with charities that have, rescued children out of exploitation. And it led me to do volunteer work with charities as a writer. And that eventually led to me becoming an advocate in this space. And I think it ended up tying in with everything I've done, in terms of a book coach, in terms of a speaker. And so it all came from that leap of faith and accepting that even though I'd been fired, there had, this was something I needed to do. And yeah, I just, we still to this day, my husband and I still sponsor that same charity, we haven't Beautiful. Stopped. So that was, I think, 2010. So, we're talking about like 14 years now, really.
Yeah.
So,
what I love about that story, there's a lot of things, but the thing that really is, and I tell people on the show and outside the show, we've talked about it, serve, don't know how, when, or where, but when you have a calling like that, just do it. You'll find the money. You're not homeless right now. That's my point. You started that 10 years ago. You didn't fall into a black hole. You didn't live out, in the streets. Something happened down the road. Somebody or something change your life because you made that effort to help human trafficking. And that's such a blessed message that you just put out there. I love that. If somebody wants to be an advocate, and you mentioned that you help people, what's a great first tip for them to go, hey, I want to be an advocate somewhere. It's so important to me.
I think find something that you're really passionate about, and even better if you have some sort of lived experience in that space, because it will really give you the authority and the confidence to speak on it. You don't have to, but it certainly helps if you connect to that issue, even if it's someone in your family went through that, whatever it is, cancer awareness, eating disorder awareness, raising awareness for better support for kids in the education system who have autism, whatever it might be. Like if you have some connection to it, it's going to give you the confidence to be able to speak in that space and the authority from the point of view of other people to go and talk about that. So I'd recommend doing that, and then definitely look at what I mentioned earlier around what are your energetic limits, like what's your capacity to serve, because you don't have to serve in a big all-encompassing way where you're on social media 24/7, where you answer everybody's questions. I don't do that. I used to, but that's how I burned out multiple times.
Yeah.
So just like, what can you do to help people in a way that also nourishes you as well?
And when you say live it or be, it's part of you, it doesn't mean like I don't have to go through domestic violence, but if my
No.
cousin went through it and
Yeah.
it's part of my life, because I
Yeah.
want to make that, because I think some people want to be an advocate, go, well, I've not had domestic violence, I can't be there. Well, absolutely. If your cousin tells you those stories and you've lived that, you lived it with them, sex abuse or whatever has happened. I love
Yeah, you
that.
think
I just
about all of the
Go ahead.
carers and
Yeah.
sorry, but yeah, if you think about like all the carers and all the family members who support people who go through these things, you see, like here in Australia, a couple of years ago, there was a horrific homicide of a woman named Hannah Clark and her 3 children. And, absolutely horrendous. But her parents are now huge advocates and have started a charity, in her name. And obviously, it's very close to home. But I recently went to an event, a fundraiser for Hannah Clark, Hannah Clark's charity. It's called Small Steps for Hannah. And I ended up meeting one of her really good friends there. I think one of her high school best friends. And I think she was talking about, I don't know whether she advocates in a big way, but she's somebody who's been so impacted by losing one of her best friends. And if she wanted to go out and advocate, or if she does that right now, that's a really huge lived experience that gives her the authority to speak on it. I'd lost my best friend to this. So it doesn't have to have happened to you, but exactly what you said, Steve. Yeah.
Thank you, Jas. I can't believe we ran out of time. I knew this would happen. Time would fly, and I love it. How can people get a hold of you, Jas?
So you can find me on Instagram. It's Jas_Rawlinson, Jas with an S. Just type my name. Also, I'll be sharing some resources with Steve that you're welcome to jump on, some free resources. There's a workshop I did a little while ago called Your Story is Your Superpower. It's one of my most popular workshops that I run, all about learning how to embrace your story, learning why sometimes the best stories come from the most challenged writers or people who don't feel like they're experts or the world's best writer, and really learning how you can use your story to make a difference. So that's usually a paid workshop, but I'm going to make that available for free for your audience, Steve. And then every, usually 2 months, I run a more advanced half-day workshop called Advocate of Impact. And that's really there to support those people who really want to step up their advocacy game and teach them, how to pitch their story to the media, how to get journalists to say yes to their story, how to set boundaries with, friends, with the media, and really have those boundaries in place as you step up as an advocate. So I'll link that as well for anyone that wants to join one of the upcoming versions of Advocate of Impact. But there's, plenty of ways to connect. And the best way is to just jump on jasrawlinson.com. Just jump into just sign up to my newsletter, and, you'll get lots of support through there as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the free gift. And thank you for an incredible show. This is a tough subject, but you make it sound so easy to talk about, which it needs to be talked about, whether it's easy or not. We can't just hide it. It's got to be put out there. And what this show is unbelievable, and I'll tell you why. Jas has talked about some things in 5 and 6 minute clips. Guess what? There's a forward and a reverse button on a podcast on YouTube or the podcast platform. Use that. If there are parts of this, like being an advocate, we would love for you to watch and listen to the whole show. I know me and Jas would, but we also be more important to us if a 5 or 6 minute clip changed your life, or you share that with somebody in your life that could really listen to this. And of course, have them reach out to Jas as well, because as you can see, she's lived it. She's gone past it. She still works on herself every day, but she's a wonderful human being. And that's who you want to talk to when it comes to this stuff. Don't forget about my TV show, Together We Serve, every Friday at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. Also, too, put doing business with a servant's heart and doing life with a servant's heart on your chest, on your head. We've got hats, we've got t-shirts, we've got hoodies. So let's get that message out to the world, like Jas is doing with human trafficking and domestic violence. Let's get that message out. Let's have more of a servant heart. And always, me and Jas, thank you so much for watching and listening to our show. And we'll see you on the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart.